Hello, my name is Adhisakti Sahasrara Nugroho, and today I will be presenting my thesis, which is titled Variable Relationships of Familiarity, Corporate Brand Image, Attitude, Subjective Norms on Influencing Purchase Intention of DFC Online Streaming. My thesis supervisor is Naila Zulfa. This is the outline of my presentation today. And starting with chapter 1 introduction, the UFC itself is the largest MMA organizer in the world, and it saw significant increases in viewership during the pandemic, becoming ESPN Plus's #1 program for 18 to 34-year-olds. As we can see from the graph here, ESPN Plus has seen major growth since 2020. This quick rise resulted in record financial performances for the UFC with a high number of concurrent live viewers. Therefore, the UFC wanted to expand into Asia and Indonesia, partnering with local broadcasting and online streaming companies such as Mola TV in Indonesia. Indonesia was viewed as a high potential market due to the also exponential rise in streaming service subscribers, with Netflix, Disney Plus, Video, and Mola TV being affected among those. MMA and the UFC has not been established in this market, and therefore it is viewed as high potential for customer gain. However, we must also see the negative stigma of MMA or mixed martial arts. It is generally associated with violence and therefore have negative biases towards them, because in Indonesia, martial arts is viewed more of a self-defense and tradition instead of a sport. Therefore, I gauge public perception by interviewing 3 people, asking them how familiar they are, if they know anyone who watched the UFC, and how they think people view the UFC. This gave me results of moderate familiarity, however, generally negative biases, and people don't really watch the UFC. This leads us to problem formulation. The first 2 studies stated here focuses on familiarity, attitude, and corporate brand image on establishing a firm in a market, as well as how it affects purchase intention. However, it lacks the exploration of how modern digital platforms, social media can affect this purchase intent, as well as corporate brand image, specifically on how it affects purchase intent. It also does not consider cultural barriers such as subjective norms. The study by Chidu, previously, we also saw this, that there are generally negative biases towards MMA. However, it lacks exploration on how these biases actually affect behaviors of individuals as well as purchase intention. So this leads us to problem statement. There is a gap in research concerning the dynamics of the UFC's marketing strategies when they enter Indonesia. Despite that, we understand from McLaren 2017 that familiarity and corporate brand image are significant parts of the UFC's market strategy. There is a lack of in-depth exploration of how these specific mechanisms work. There's also a gap in research between subjective norms and how it actually affects the purchase intent of the UFC or MMA or combat sports in general. This leads us to the research question and objectives. It highlights the relationships that we have previously stated with familiarity on corporate brand image on attitude, attitude on purchase intention, and also subjective norms on purchase intention. And the research objective is we have to examine whether these relationships are true. This leads us to the contribution of the study. The practical contribution is that the UFC and similar firms may make marketing strategies and decisions based on the greater understanding between these variables. And the theoretical contribution is that there is a greater understanding in general on how these variables interact with each other. For the scope of the study, we use a modification of Laroche et al.'s model. The object of the study is the consumer's evaluation of familiarity, corporate brand image, attitude, and subjective norms related to the UFC. The subject of the study is every Indonesian above the age of 17, and the location is in Indonesia, and the timeline was 14 days between July and August 2024. Now moving on to chapter 2, which is literature development and hypothesis development. The first variable in the study is familiarity. Familiarity encompasses recognition, general knowledge, and closeness to a brand. It is built through advertising, word of mouth, and first-hand experience, and it allows consumer encounters, reinforcing recognition and recall of a brand. This leads into corporate brand image, which refers to the perception of corporate brand image in this study. And corporate brand image itself communicates core values, missions, personality of a company in order to establish a distinctive and recognizable identity. Perceptions of corporate brand image is influenced by consumer familiarity, because corporate brand image can only be exposed towards the consumer if they have familiarity towards it. Then this leads us to attitude, which is defined as a learned predisposition towards a brand, which can be positive or negative. And a strong brand image creates impressions towards a brand, influencing attitude. We must also look at subjective norms, which are the social pressures and expectations influencing a behavior of an individual. This becomes a powerful predictor of purchase intention as well as behavior in general. Lastly, purchase intention is the likelihood that a consumer will buy a product or service and is influenced by attitude and subjective norms. From these justifications, we must look at the hypothesis development. This is the model used in the study, and there are four hypotheses. The first one is familiarity with the UFC has a positive effect on perception of corporate brand image. Second is perception of corporate brand image has a positive effect on consumer attitude. Third is attitude towards the UFC has a positive effect on purchase intention. And lastly, subjective norms has a positive effect on UFC online streaming. Now moving on to chapter 3, research methodology. This study focuses on familiarity, corporate brand image, attitude, subjective norms on purchase intention of UFC online streaming and employed a survey research strategy through Google Forms. The study setting is not contrived and a one-shot or cross-sectional time horizon is used. The population and sample criteria is stated here. However, this will be in detail on the next slide. The sample size is 210 minimum samples due to the 21 research indicators used. The sampling method is going to be non-probability and purposeful sampling in order to target a particular group of people with the specific characteristics to be relevant to the research objectives. Indonesian residents were chosen because of the study being held in Indonesia and UFC expanding into Indonesia. 17 years old and above is representative of the population that meets the Mola TV guidelines to watch the UFC and purchase online streaming, and have never purchased UFC online streaming before as representative of the population who are unaware of the UFC and the UFC aims to target in order to increase their customer base. Past studies also yield different results based on the purchase intention of first-time buyers or previously purchased before buyers. And because we are aiming to understand the purchase intention of new buyers, we will choose this option here. For data collection, we will utilize primary data, and this is collected on a 5-point Likert scale for each of our variable later on. For the research instrument, it is a questionnaire distributed on Google Form, and it is spread through the researchers' network, social media, as well as online survey sharing platform of kudata.id. It is made up of these 5 parts, with the first part being the opening statement, then respondent screening questions, which filters out the samples, profile of respondents, variable questions, as well as the closing statement. These are the operational definitions and measurements. These is familiarity and corporate brand image. The next one is attitude, subjective norms, and purchase intention. These are all translated into Indonesian by a professional. For the data analysis, we will use the PLS method. This is chosen because it is able to handle complex models as well as for path models as well as regression models. For the outer model, we will use validity and reliability testing to ensure accurate construct as well as consistent measure. For the inner model, we will use model fit, Q square, R square, and effects F square, as well as hypothesis testing. We conducted a small sample test, first with qualitative data gathering from 5 individuals in order to get feedback on the research instrument, and from their input, we changed certain things inside the questionnaire. Then we did validity testing and reliability testing. These are the results of the validity and reliability testing. Convergent validity shows that all the outer loadings are above 0.7, and also the AVE also exceeds 0.5. And we also look at the Forner-Larker criterion. All of the square root of AVEs is greater than the correlation of with the other latent variables, and therefore passing discriminant validity. For reliability, it is similar, with all of the variables being above the Cronbach alpha value of 0.6, as well as the composite reliability value of 0.7. Therefore, all of the indicators may be retained for this study. Now moving on to chapter 4, data analysis. The respondents of the profiles of the respondents, we have 529 total respondents who are valid out of the 754 gathered. This was filtered out from the sample criteria previously stated. The gender demographic is near even, but the age demographic, the majority is from 17 to 25-year-olds. This is possibly due to the spread of the distribution of the questionnaire being online, social media, as well as on kudata.id. We may now look at the validity testing of the large sample. Similar to a small sample, all of the indicators exceed 0.7 outer loading. This gives satisfactory indication of validity. However, we may now also look at the AVEs. AVEs are also all exceeding 0.5, therefore validity is satisfactory. And also, if we check the Forner-Larker criterion, all of the square roots of the AVEs are exceeding the associations with other latent variables. Therefore, this satisfies discriminant validity. Moving on to the reliability, all of the composite reliability are greater than 0.7, as well as the Cronbach alpha greater than 0.6. Therefore, we may deem it meeting the requirements for reliability. Moving on to the descriptive statistics, out of all the indicators and variables, it is quite similar. They all have a mean from around 3.5 to 3.6, apart from subjective norms, which is slightly lower at 3.477. All of the standard deviations are moderate from around 0.9 to 1, a bit above 1.0. Now looking at the model fit, the SRMR value meets our cutoff value. However, the NFI value is slightly lower than our cutoff value from Hu and Bentler in 1999. However, according to Kyrie et al., a 0.80 or between an NFI between 0.8 and 0.9 is often referred to as moderate, and therefore may be accepted if other model fit measures meet the criteria. Therefore, our NFI of 0.887 is accepted and acceptable for use in the study. In the R-square testing, we see that corporate brand image and attitude have a moderate R-square. Meanwhile, purchase intention has a strong R-square. This means that purchase intention is largely attributed to factors of attitude and subjective norms in the study. Furthermore, we look at the Q-square. Due to the Q-square being greater than 0, we can determine that the exogenous variables possess predictive relevance for the endogenous variables in this study. Now looking at the F-square, effect size F-square, all of the variable relationships have a strong relationship apart from subjective norms to purchase intention. Now we may look at the hypothesis testing. We use a 95% confidence level. This means a 0.05 p-value and a t-table value of 1.96 is the critical values for accepting the hypotheses. From this, we can see that all of the relationships and hypotheses in the study is supported, with all of them having moderate and moderate to strong, quite a strong actually, a coefficient, apart from subjective norms to purchase intention. Now we can discuss this. All of the hypotheses were accepted, meaning that familiarity does positively influence corporate brand image positively influence attitude, attitude to purchase intention, and subjective norms to purchase intention also. This aligns with previous studies stated here. We may now look at the conclusion of the study. There are 4 key findings. The first one being purchase intention being the focus of the study. It is found that out of the 2 influencing variables tested, which is attitude and subjective norms, attitude has the greater influence. Thus, attitude, in order to influence attitude, consumer perceptions of the UFC's corporate brand image is a key driver. Therefore, it solidifies the importance of corporate brand image in the overall strategy of the UFC. Furthermore, familiarity towards the UFC brand is key in influencing the perceptions of this corporate brand image. Therefore, it highlights the importance of building familiarity as a starting point for marketing efforts of the UFC. While less influential, subjective norms is still significant in influencing purchase intention. Therefore, understanding the subjective norms for the broader context is important in understanding purchase intention of the UFC as well as their online streaming service in Indonesia. We can see the 2 managerial implications here, in which first, the UFC and similar firms must strategically build positive attitudes in order to maximize purchase intentions. They can do this by leveraging a strong corporate brand image and also leveraging familiarity to build that strong corporate brand image. Furthermore, management of the UFC and similar firms must take into account of subjective norms due to its significant effect on purchase intention. This may be done by market research to understand subjective norms, and also they may cultivate positive subjective norms by by local partnerships, community building initiatives, social media campaigns to try and portray the UFC in a more acceptable light to local populations. Furthermore, they may include Indonesian athletes or include Indonesian martial arts promoted into MMA itself. The research limitations, first, there is limited variable usage as well as a limited scope. In order to, for limited variable usage, futures researchers should implement variables affecting purchase intentions such as pricing, consumer financial situations, and availability of product. Furthermore, variables affecting attitudes such as the other facets of UFC branding, like personal brand image of the UFC fighters, as well as the product brand image, should be explored. For limited scope, expanding the scope to cross-firm comparative study with other MMA firms or boxing firms or Muay Thai or maybe other sports in general could help with generalizability of the findings. Furthermore, Cross-market comparative study is very important. Expanding the research to East Asia, Latin America, Europe, or North America would result in further insights to whether specific branding elements need to be adapted based on the cultural context. This has been my presentation. Thank you very much.